Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Josh Strife-Hayes and I love MMORPGs. Every single year people ask me what online game they should play. So I've decided to break down all the popular ones and give you some super simple reasons to play or avoid each game. Today we're asking the question, should you play old school RuneScape in 2020? Is the game worth your time or is it just a pointless grind? Let's cover everything you'll need to know to answer this for yourself, and then at the end of the video I'll give you my opinion. Number 1. What is old school RuneScape? Now, RuneScape was one of the earlier MMORPGs. It was a super simple Java-based game hosted on Miniclip and ran straight from the browser, meaning you didn't need to download it. Because the whole no download thing, it was played the world over on school and library computers. Now, gameplay was simple. A bird's eye view of your character, the game world was made up of square tiles and you could click to move, click to fight and click to interact. It was a very lightweight system. Now, combat was click and wait. You'd hit the enemy, they'd hit you, repeat until one of you died. No special moves or abilities, just basic repeating attacks. It was extremely simple, but in a charming retro way. Now, RuneScape quickly grew to be one of the most popular free MMORPGs, and while it never reached the heights of Warcraft, it did have a stable player base. In later years, RuneScape would see several major updates and changes. The graphics were updated, replacing the 2D sprites with 3D rendered models and giving everything a clunky feel. The user interface was redesigned and the weapons now had special attacks, but it was still fundamentally the same click and wait game. More major updates saw the removal of the Wilderness, an iconic player versus player danger zone. Then it was put back, then more graphics, then finally a major overhaul to the combat system called the Evolution of Combat, which replaced the click and wait style with abilities, cooldowns, buffs, debuffs and all manner of more advanced fighting choices. This update massively divided the community. Some players loved how the game was moving with the times and some hated the iconic system being changed. More changes, both graphical, gameplay and monetization, eventually crept in and led to RuneScape morphing into what we now know as RuneScape 3. Now, during this time the game had been bleeding players. People didn't recognise the game anymore and were leaving in droves. So Jagex, the developers, asked the community if they'd like a server of RuneScape just as it was in 2007. Same old graphics, same old combat, same old everything. The players responded with a resounding yes, and old school RuneScape was born. That's what this game started as, a copy of RuneScape exactly as it was in 2007, as it's actually made from an archived backup of the game from that year. However, it's not remained the same. It's maintained and updated by a small but dedicated team at Jagex. All updates to the game are presented to the players as a poll each month, and if an idea doesn't meet with at least 75% approval, it doesn't get added, meaning it's a game mostly driven by the player base. This system is both a blessing and a curse. It allows players to vote against updates that would destroy the integrity or fundamental playstyle of the game, but it allows players to vote against major changes simply because they don't want anything to ever change. So that is what old school RuneScape is now, a 2007 copy of the game driven by community-wide committee. It's a free-to-play to an extent. As a free player, you'll gain access to most of the skills a character can train and a small selection of quests. But once you've explored the free world, you'll be encouraged to become a paying member. The fee as it stands is $11 a month. And for that, you get a massive world, hundreds more quests and some members-only skills. Now, if you're rich in the game, you can actually buy membership using in-game gold. So once you can make in-game gold, you can fund your membership by continuing to play the game. Probably the single best thing about old school RuneScape, it's available on mobile, the entire game. Mobile players use the same servers as PC players, so everyone can connect, skill and kill together. Perfect for doing a quick herb run on your lunch break or lying in bed doing some fishing. Old school RuneScape is now 7 years old, which means it's been running longer than the version of the game it was based on, which is just proof of its incredible success. 2. General gameplay, the day-to-day grind. So when you log into old school RuneScape, what do you actually do? You've got access to multiple skills and you train them all by actually doing the skill. Want to get better at mining? Go mine stuff. Want to get better at fishing? Go fish. You train your various styles of combat by fighting with that style of combat. Each skill is capped at 99, and in the early game you'll shoot through levels. However, as you get higher and higher, the experience needed for the next level increases exponentially. Meaning when you reach level 92 after weeks of grinding, you're actually halfway to 99. The higher your skill, the more methods you have available to train it. You can also collect and make rarer items using those skills and then sell the stuff to other players. Some players play the game this way entirely and avoid combat altogether. We know them as skillers. If you're more into the fighting side of things, it's basically the same. Kill low level stuff, gain levels, kill high level stuff. What weapons you can use and armor you can wear is dictated by your levels, and you can train each independently, meaning if you never ever focus on training your defense, you can wield the powerful weapons, but you must wear the lowest level armor. Combat on the surface is extremely simple. Click an enemy to attack it, wait. Now for most casual players, this is all it will ever be. But once you get further in, you do realise there's subtle touches that actually matter. Some enemies are weak to certain weapons or styles. Some enemies protect against damage from a certain style. At later levels, there's a surprising amount of variation for such a simple system. There are bosses for every level of player, from simple, bigger versions of smaller enemies to dedicated boss rooms, then finally raids, which are randomly generated high-level content. Several rooms picked from a large selection of rooms you need to fight your way through for a chance at some epic loot. It's important to note that old school RuneScape doesn't often use instances, meaning these bosses are just hanging around in the public world, so other players can and will crash you. If you're soloing a boss and a team of high level players logs in and starts doing more damage, tough luck. They're getting the drop, you're wasting your time. So be aware that bossing is a time consuming and risky activity. Talking of risk, what happens when you die? Well, old school RuneScape is actually a bit more hardcore than most online games. There's been a recent change to the death mechanics, but basically you drop all but your 3 most valuable items. The stuff you drop will go into a gravestone that's created where you died, and you've got to get back to it to get your stuff back. It's not super hardcore, but it does mean death in a hard to reach place is often quite annoying. Now if you're looking for less random killing and more organised adventure, you'll want to start completing quests. Quests in old school RuneScape, despite the aged appearance, are some of the best quests in any MMORPG. Every single one is a storyline, and most of them are several quests long, with some of the latest quests taking upwards of 3 or 4 hours to finish. Quests have level requirements, meaning you'll sometimes need to train a skill before you can start, but the best training methods in the game are often locked behind quests, so it's always worth working your way through and doing them. Now I love quests. I recently got my quest cape, a reward for finishing every quest in the game. Took several hundred hours, totally worth it. If you're not questing or training your skills, you'll likely be playing some minigames, of which old school RuneScape has loads. From team combat based games like Pest Control, to brewing beer together in Trouble Brewing, dueling another player at the Duel Arena, or training your magic in the dangerous Mage Arena. There's loads to do, and you'll be able to find something you enjoy. Just be careful with that Mage Arena one, because it's located in the wilderness. Now the wilderness is a player versus player area of the map to the north. The deeper you go into the wilderness, the higher the wilderness level gets. The level represents the level difference you can now be attacked by. So if you're level 50 in level 20 wilderness, you can be attacked by or attack people 20 levels above or below you. Attacking other players makes you sculled, shown by a skull over your head. If you die while sculled, you'll drop all your stuff, meaning if you kill a player who's killed another player, you get their things. Now player versus player in old school RuneScape is alive and well. It's probably one of the most active PvP games out right now. Just avoid the bounty hunter worlds. In theory they're great, but Jagex messed up and they're just full of people gaming the system for loot. If you're not training, bossing, minigaming or killing people, you'll most likely be standing at the Grand Exchange, old school RuneScape's marketplace. Now very few items in old school RuneScape are soul bound, meaning once you've finished with an item, you can just sell it on. The Grand Exchange covers every single server and makes buying and selling super simple. If you're a skilled economist, you can make billions of gold by buying low and selling high, or predicting market shifts. Many players do. Now being able to buy anything you need is nice, but it can remove the challenge for some players. Some people prefer to play the game their way and only use items they get themselves. No trading, no marketplace. These people can start an Iron Man character. It basically prevents you from trading other players or using the Grand Exchange, meaning if you want to get that super powerful weapon, you've got to actually go kill the thing that drops it. And that is a basic overview of your day-to-day gameplay, training skills, playing mini-games, completing quests, killing bosses or players, or hanging around the GE. Now let's take a look at some more in-depth specifics. 3. Character creation and the tutorial. There are no races in old school RuneScape. You'll be playing as a human and your customization options are extremely limited. You can change your hairstyle, upper half clothing, lower half clothing and feet size, but seeing as you'll be wearing armor, all this stuff is very rarely seen anyway. Each player begins on Tutorial Island, a locked off island with a very linear task line you must follow. It'll teach you the basics like cutting down trees and starting fires, fighting with swords and bows, then let you loose on the mainland. Once you arrive in the beginner city of Lumbridge, there's almost no direction at all. You're here, good luck. If you've played before, you'll know to go talk to the cook to start a quest, but for a brand new player, this is an absolutely directionless moment. What the hell do you do? Thankfully, you've got a minimap and a world map that displays everything from shops to quests, and you'll be able to navigate pretty easily. So once you're in Lumbridge, time to train some skills. 4. Classes and skills. Along with not having races, old school RuneScape does not have classes. You're not a warrior or a wizard or a bard. You're able to train everything. Equipping items often has level requirements. You can't equip better armor until you've trained your defense, and you can't cast the good spells until you've trained magic. And you train these skills by just doing them. Every single point of damage you inflict on an enemy while using a bow will give you ranged experience. You don't actually need to kill the enemy. It's counted per point of damage. Once you're a higher level and able to equip more stuff, you can mix and match your equipment choices. Want to have a magical staff and throw fireballs around while dressed in plate armor? Go for it. Want to be a leather-wearing ranger with a great axe? Sure thing, champ. Just remember, some weapons or armor give negative bonuses to certain combat styles, so finding the right mix for each situation is very important. Now, the Slayer skill is the closest thing to a traditional go kill X amount of enemy quests other MMORPGs tend to do. Talking to a Slayer master gets you a certain task. You'll go kill that task, then get another task. Repeat until you are rich. Some players choose to avoid training a certain skill, such as defense or magic, in order to keep their total combat level artificially low, giving them an advantage in player versus player combat. You might attack someone thinking, they're only combat level 40, when in reality they've got 90 strength and will one-hit kill you. An important point with the classless system, there are no healers. Each individual player is responsible for healing themselves. You bring food or potions with you and you take care of your own hit points. You can drop healing items on the ground for other players to pick up, or you can trade directly with them and give them food, but you can't be a medic. Number 5, the leveling experience. So what's the experience of leveling a skill actually like? Well, it's different for each skill. If you want to level farming, you'll be running around all over the place, planting various seeds, harvesting crops, watering them, checking you have enough compost. It's an involved, complex thing that's highly engaging and rewarding. But if you want to train woodcutting, go and click on a tree and wait. And wait some more. Then when you've got that tree, just click on another tree. Now, some skills are incredibly quick and can be trained faster by spending money on them. Dropping a load of cash on expensive herbs will get you maxed herb lore in a couple of days. But some skills, like the often loathed runecraft, take weeks and weeks of repetitive grind to get anywhere near max level. And mostly, it's just grinding. You'll perform the same or similar actions over and over again for between days and weeks. Then when you reach 99 in a skill, you'll be able to buy and wear the skill cape of that skill, showing everyone around you that, yep, you did max out that specific thing. If you're able to achieve the insanely impressive and time-consuming task of getting all your skills to the max level of 99, you'll be able to wear the coveted max cape, one of the best and rarest capes in the game. 6. Combat. If you're going to be killing stuff for hours and hours, let's explore the combat system. Old school RuneScape uses a click and wait style of combat for most things. The weapon you use will have a specific attack stat, such as slash, stab or crush, and the enemy will have a defense against each of these stats. Simply bring a weapon they're weak against. Bigger weapons will attack slower, smaller ones will attack faster. Now, at low levels, combat is extremely boring. You'll be killing cows or chickens and hitting 0 damage on them, often because your accuracy sucks. If you're able to stand this low-level grind and get to the mid-game, it gets a little bit better. Enemies will have more health and different weaknesses, but it's still mostly a case of equip what they're weak against, click and wait. This rather simple system is a reminder of the game's 2007 origins, but the later updates and the new content has really taken the limitations and started to push them. Newer bosses change attack styles and cause environmental damage. They have minions spawn and even teleport players around the place. You need to switch equipment quickly and react to small subtle changes in the battle. The newer content has proved that even a very simple click and wait system can be manipulated into a remarkably entertaining and engaging fight. 7. Endgame Experience. The idea of RuneScape having a set endgame is odd, because you're able to take part in almost everything once you've finished most of the quests and got your levels to around 90, which isn't even halfway. The endgame opens up way before you're actually maxed out, but let's just say you're a completionist and you're focused on grinding everything out. So what do you do once you've got everything to 99? Okay, first of all, if you manage to do that, well done. It's an incredibly impressive feat. So let's take a look at what's left. If you've not completed every quest in the game, go and do that to get a quest cape. Then after that, you'll want to work on the diary cape. Each geographical zone of the game has a diary attached to it, and each diary is full of tasks. Completing every task gives you the diary cape. Then you can access the boss log and see if you've received every unique drop from every boss. I don't mean bought the item and own it, I mean you have actually received it as a drop. You can start pet hunting. Certain bosses or skills drop pets by random chance. They are remarkably rare and very few players have ever collected all of them. Then finally you can take on the Inferno or the Corrupted Gauntlet, two of the hardest player versus enemy challenges that must be done entirely solo and take an incredible amount of skill to complete. Or you could just join other maxed players and raid all day. Your choice. Number 8. The World of Gielinor. The lands of Gielinor are vast and varied, from thriving cities to dank swamps, crystal castles or dense jungles. There's a lot of biomes to explore and places to find. Because of the camera angle and bird's eye viewpoint, it can sometimes feel colder, less inviting, but the lands themselves are definitely full of history and intrigue. At low levels, travelling around is limited to just walking or running. Then as you train your magic, you'll be able to teleport to major cities. Finishing quests gives you access to a fairy ring transportation system or an underground minecart grid. The more you play, the more you unlock, and the easier the world becomes to traverse. It's heavily reminiscent of the 1990s Dungeons & Dragons maps, a wizard's tower, a port town, a magical forest. The retro inspiration is easy to spot, and as it's an older game engine, there's very few weather effects. You can get cold in the frozen lands and dehydrate in the desert though, which are both quite nice touches. As there's only one grand exchange in the city of Varrock, you'll find most players on most worlds are located here. Then they travel to wherever before returning here. It's the community hub, and often extremely chatty. You'll find every type of conversation you can imagine, from the absolute best to the absolute worst. 9. Minigames. Minigames are an absolute divide within the community. Some of them have super amazing rewards, like the Void armor set from Pest Control. Some of them are cosmetic only and far too complex to bother learning, like the beer brewing minigame Trouble Brewing. There's a load of choices, some combat based like endurance challenge The Fight Caves. Some are skill based like the farming related Tithe Farm, but most players will only focus on a minigame with rewards that actually matter. There's a minigame for everything you can think of. Want to play rugby? Go and play Gnome Ball. Want to train agility in an interesting way? Go and recreate the Matrix in Brimhaven Agility Arena. But unless that minigame is ultimately giving you a reward worth having, you'll find very, very few players willing to play them just for fun. Each minigame has a specific world assigned to it, so you can hop to that world and find like-minded people ready to play. If you're a fan of Capture the Flag, then Castle Wars is always active. Red versus Blue, go grab their flag while protecting your own. Super simple, great fun. Number 10. The dungeons and raids. So you've leveled up a bit and brought some equipment. Time to go hunt some bosses. What do you need to know? Well, ultra high level endgame raids have a party system, allowing a team of players to join together, explore a private instance, and then each receive a share of the loot. Any other bosses in the game do not have this system, so we'll look at the lower level stuff first. If you and a friend decide to go and hunt a boss, you'll be doing so in the open public world, meaning no instances, no private bosses. You're killing an enemy that everyone else has access to, and whoever deals the most damage to the enemy gets the drop. That means if you're not hitting the highest, you have to trust your friend will pick up the drop and split it with you after the kill. Although there's no specific class system, the first player to attack the boss will often become the focus of the boss's aggro, making that player the tank for this specific kill. So it's normal to see a group of players nominate one player to gear up fully defensively while the others do the actual damage. You're killing a hard boss and someone else you don't know joins in, and if they hit more than you, they get the drop. It's infuriating and irritatingly common. Now, certain bosses are locked behind quests or level requirements, so you've got to do some prep work before you can get there. But they're also amazingly good money, so it's worth your time. Once you're very rich and very high level, you'll be taking on raids. Currently there are 2 available, the Chambers of Xeric and the Theatre of Blood. It's entirely possible to solo both of them, but this is something only the most skilled and richest of players can do. Most people will take in a team. You'll fight through a private generated instance and kill the boss, open the chest, and the better you perform, the more reward potential you earn. If you die, you lose potential. If you die while having no potential, the entire team loses potential. So it's paramount to take a team of people who know what they are doing, or you are willing to spend a few days learning, because failure in raids is a very costly mistake. They do, however, drop the most valuable items in the game by a long shot. A mid-level boss may drop an item worth a few million, but raids have items that sell for over $1 billion. One good raid drop, you're set for life. 11. The lore and quests. RuneScape 3, the live game, has diverted from old school RuneScape rather heavily, meaning there are 2 RuneScape timelines. I'll be focusing on the old school one. Now, RuneScape isn't often the first game that people think of when it comes to deep and complex lore, but it will surprise you. There's a whole history of the world before the gods as we know it ruled. There's in-game item descriptions filling in the gaps in our knowledge. There's a whole historical museum in the game where you can wander around and celebrate RuneScape history, both in and out of game. But the most intriguing part is the lore told through quests. The quests in old school RuneScape run the entire spectrum from absolutely god-awful and boring, like Witch's Potion or Imp Catcher, to some of the best in the entire genre, like Dragon Slayer 2 or Song of the Elves. Each quest, especially the more recent ones, are high quality, well-written stories, following events or characters in the RuneScape lore and showing you a glimpse into the truth of the world, from curing the plague that's ravaging the western city to joining a ragtag group of resistance fighters standing up to the tyrannical eastern vampires. The majority of quests are top quality, and more importantly, they're memorable. If I said, hey, remember that quest in Terra where you killed 10 pigs? You'd say, no, because it was shallow and forgetful. When I say, hey, could you do me one small favour? You'll have flashbacks to one of the longest, most tedious quest chains ever. Quests in RuneScape expand the lore of the game and get you involved with the story. Also, there's more than a few major character deaths, which are remarkably emotional when they do happen. 12. Graphics. Most common reason I hear for why people don't want to try this game is the graphics. There's no getting around it, they're old. The polygon limit on items and in-game assets makes them very, very basic. There's no native skybox. There's very few textures on anything. Most swords or armor pieces are just color swap versions of the previous level. There's a lot to nitpick and complain about here. And yet, I find them charming. Now, I've often talked about graphics versus style, and how something looking realistic is nice, but something looking stylistic is better. Old school RuneScape has a style. When they changed the graphics for RuneScape 3, people were divided, and this proved that high polygon counts and detailed textures aren't everything. Look, some of the old models suck, I'll agree with that. I'm a huge OSRS fan, and even I can agree that this looks bad. But seeing what the team have been able to do lately, the same limitations apply, but the designer skill has improved so much, and the newer stuff is full of style and flair. There's a rumour of a HD client. If something like this were to happen and yet keep the same core style, I feel a lot more people would play. But for now, let's deal with what we actually have. An old looking game. And if you're able to look past the graphics, you'll be rewarded with a great experience. But we do need to admit, most of what's driving us is nostalgia. and to a brand new player, this could be quite off-putting. 13. The music. Now, RuneScape 3 has an orchestral score. Old school RuneScape does not. If you're a returning player, you'll be comforted by the familiar MIDI tones. If you're a new player, you'll be wondering why it sounds like you're playing something from the SNES era. Music's basic, and the sound effects are fine. There's nothing major to write home about here. It serves its purpose of being a retro fantasy soundtrack, but you won't be humming any of these tunes or downloading any of them to listen to. Apart from Sea Shanty 2. That track is actually quite good. 14. The community. Now, in the interest of being both fair and diplomatic, I have to word this very carefully. Old school RuneScape has an intense community. Now, most players in-game are fine. You'll find a lot of chatty people and inviting, accepting clans. But the truth is, if you dig into the more elite and niche groups, there's a level of toxicity in this game that's extremely offensive to some people. Now, I'd advise anyone looking for a casual gameplay experience to avoid the more established player versus player clans. They're extremely intense and very tribal. Of course, if that's the kind of gameplay and people you're looking for, then go right ahead, jump in. Just be aware it's intense. Now, the official RuneScape forums used to be one of the most active online discussion boards in the world, and now it's migrated to Reddit, YouTube, and Twitter. The OSRS subreddit r/2007scape is one of the busiest MMORPG subreddits in the world and always has thousands of active people. The Twitter community is vastly supportive, and then there's another huge divide. Contacting Jagex, the developing company, using in-game tools is difficult. The system for account help is old and archaic, but contacting individual developers on Twitter is both remarkably easy and often rather friendly. You can tweet at a graphics guy or the lead developer, and usually you'll get a response pretty fast. 15. Content creators, the Wiki, and Addons. So if you do start playing, how easy is it to find content or up-to-date information? Okay, here's the truth, and I don't say this lightly. Old school RuneScape has the best wiki of any MMORPG. Literally everything you could ever want to know about this game is online somewhere. People have charts and tables, drop chance percent ratings, efficiency calculators, best to worst gear guides. Old school RuneScape has been documented to within an inch of its life. From items to quests to history, you will have no problem finding the most minute details of anything in this game. Then there's the content creators. Old school RuneScape has some incredible video makers. From quest guides to boss tactics, all the way to super entertaining area locked accounts, where people try to play the game limiting themselves to only one place. Some of these series became so famous they made real world news. Now, as for Twitch, old school RuneScape blows most MMORPGs out of the water and routinely sits at or near the top of the most watched games. You've got everything from player versus player to casual treasure trails. There's a whole plethora of gameplay styles. Now, for add-ons, you can't really change the vanilla client too much, but I'd recommend downloading and playing on RuneLite. It's a more advanced client that gives you access to many customization options. It's been given the unofficial go-ahead by Jagex and just makes playing the game so much more enjoyable. 16. Lifespan and longevity. Now, no one likes to invest time in a dying game, so will all of this last? 2007scape has shown that by placing all proposed updates into the hands of a community, the game moves ahead in the direction the community collectively agree upon, and so far that's proven a great system. New skills have been proposed and denied, new updates to content have been suggested and approved, and as long as Jagex keep listening to the very knowledgeable player base, they'll keep pushing old school RuneScape in the best direction. Plus, it's one of the most popular MMORPGs in the world, so I'm confident in saying we've got many years of old school RuneScape left yet, so should you play the game. It's an old foundation with a newer building being created as we go. It's got old graphics and old music and is a little rough around the edges, but under the simple looking surface, you've got a remarkably complex, deep game with months if not years of challenging content and some really memorable adventures to be had. If you can look past the aging graphics and click-based gameplay, then yes, old school RuneScape is one of the most loved and established MMORPGs. It's got a thriving community, and providing the devs keep listening to the player base, it'll go from strength to strength. So make a free account, give it a go, and see how you like life in Gielinor. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to come chat live, I'm usually streaming on Twitch over at twitch.tv/JoshStriveHayes. Drop a like on the video and sub to the channel for more MMORPG related stuff. Massive thank you to all my supporters on Patreon and the Twitch subs who make all my content possible. Check the description below for links to the Patreon, Twitter or Discord chat. And as always, have a great day.